They say legends are not born under bright lights but under gray skies. They're shaped not by applause but by silence, by hunger, by loss, by the quiet wars no one sees. And if that's true, then Liam Neeson was never made in Hollywood. He was forged in hardship, sculpted by pain, and carried by a kind of dignity the world can't fake. Before we begin, take a breath and look past the fame. What you'll find isn't a story of victory. It's a story of endurance, of a man who learned that love and pain are sometimes the same teacher. If that kind of truth still means something to you, stay with me till the end. Because this isn't about the man who played heroes. It's about the man who became one by surviving everything that tried to break him. He was born on June 7, 1952, in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, under a sky the color of ash. A small grey house, a family of 6, and winters that came early and left late. His father, Barney, swept floors in a school that was too expensive for his own son. His mother, Kitty, spent her days cooking for other people's children and came home with hands blistered from boiling water. The wallpaper peeled, the floors moaned. The walls were so thin you could hear every sigh through them. There was no shouting, no chaos, only the kind of quiet that poverty builds. A silence so thick it becomes part of you. Liam was the only boy among 3 sisters, Elizabeth, Bernadette, and Rosaline. Their laughter filled the rooms that hunger had emptied. He was the quiet one, the watcher, the listener. His Aunt Molly later said, he always kept to himself, but if he wanted something, he'd go through a wall to get it. Aunt Molly's kitchen was his refuge, the smell of bread rising like small miracles, her voice breaking the gray spell of the town outside. Because outside those doors, the world was divided by faith and suspicion. Catholics on one side, Protestants on the other, doors that wouldn't open, stares that lasted too long. He didn't yet know the word prejudice, but he could feel it like frost in the air. I felt like a second-class citizen, he would say many years later, softly, as though saying it aloud might make it true again. His father, afraid the quiet might swallow him, sent the boy to the local boxing club at age 9. The hall smelled of sawdust, sweat, and redemption. There, under flickering lights, Liam learned to fight before he learned to speak his heart. By 14, he was a youth champion 3 years in a row, lean, composed, unreadable. He didn't fight for glory, he fought to belong. Then one night, a punch he didn't see coming found him. The crowd disappeared. Sound vanished. The world turned to white. When the noise came back, it came like thunder. Something inside him had broken that couldn't be seen, and he walked away from the ring forever. No trophies, no farewell, just silence. That silence followed him everywhere. Through the rain on the tin roof, through the nights he counted coins for bread, through the echo of his mother's prayers and the creak of the stairs that never stopped complaining. But out of that silence grew something unbreakable: patience. The kind that would later define his voice, his eyes, and every character he ever played. When he left home in the early 1970s, he carried little more than a fraying coat and a promise to himself, to make something out of nothing. Belfast was gray, the air thick with smoke and worry. He drove trucks through sleet, hauled crates until his hands cracked, shoveled gravel till his back seized. At night, he studied at St. Mary's College, dreaming of becoming a teacher, but hunger interrupts every dream. I used to count every penny, he said, and sometimes I didn't buy the bread at all. When the money ran out, he left quietly. No ceremony, no farewell, just another dream buried under the weight of necessity. He drifted through hard jobs: lorry driver, laborer, construction worker, each paid in exhaustion. Each night, he came home to small rented rooms with damp walls and a single bulb humming above his bed. Sometimes he slept in his coat because the fire had to wait for payday. There were nights he'd stare at his reflection in a cracked mirror and whisper, "Is this all there is?" But just when despair was ready to claim him, life handed him something small: a broom. Belfast. He was 24, working as a janitor at the Lyric Players Theatre, sweeping sawdust from floors where other men pretended to live different lives. And one day, when an actor didn't show up, someone asked if he could fill in. He spoke only 2 lines, but in those 2 lines something inside him woke up. On stage, he said, "I finally felt heard." He walked miles to rehearsals, too broke for bus fare, shoes splitting at the seams, coat heavy with rain. When the curtain fell, he would stand in the empty theater long after everyone had gone, because for the first time in his life, the silence felt like peace, not punishment. He moved to Dublin, then to London, slept in cramped flats with strangers, lived on tea and crusts. But his hunger had changed. It wasn't for food anymore. It was for purpose. Each performance was a prayer whispered to the dark. And slowly, the dark began to whisper back. The 1980s came with tiny breaks and endless rejection. He played soldiers, priests, nameless men. Every film promised a spark. None gave him fire. Casting directors said he was too intense, too Irish, too sad-eyed to be romantic. He kept every rejection letter, proof that at least he existed. Then, in 1993, fate came disguised as opportunity. Steven Spielberg was casting for Schindler's List. He saw what no one else had: the quiet strength, the sorrow, the gentleness behind the eyes. The role changed everything and nearly destroyed him. For 110 days, he carried the guilt and grace of Oskar Schindler. After shooting the liquidation scene, he sat alone in his dark hotel room, chain smoking in silence. "It took me months to feel like myself again," he said. The film won 7 Oscars. His name crossed continents. But fame doesn't heal. "If anything," he said, "it just makes your silence louder." He kept working. Michael Collins, Les Miserables, Gangs of New York, triumphs and disappointments, all in rotation. "Success," he said, "never belongs to you, it just rents a room." Then came Taken, a film no one believed in, and somehow it became a resurrection. Audiences didn't see an action hero. They saw a man who had already lost too much to lose again. $223 million later, the world crowned him the symbol of endurance. He called it a strange kind of rebirth. But behind every rebirth, there's a scar. Love had visited him before fame and left quietly, as love sometimes does. On the set of Excalibur, he met Helen Mirren, luminous, magnetic, fearless. She saw the shy Irishman and the soul behind the silence. For 4 years, they built a small life full of clutter and laughter. She taught him how to move through the world without apologizing. "You belong here," she said. "You just haven't realized it yet." But when fame began to knock, rumors came too, whispers that he leaned on her name. He couldn't bear to see her hurt. Walls went up where warmth had been. And one winter night, under the hum of a heater, love ended in silence. "I loved him very much," she would say later. "But we were not meant to be." He carried that silence for years. And then, in 1988, he met a girl whose laughter thawed the frost, Julia Roberts. She was 20. He was 36. 2 worlds apart, yet for a brief, bright season, they met in the middle. She called him Old Soul. He called her Light. They didn't promise forever, and perhaps that's why it lasted in memory. When she left, she said, "You already were wonderful." And that was enough. But the love that would define him arrived in 1993, under stage lights instead of stars. On Broadway's Anna Christie, he met Natasha Richardson, daughter of theater royalty. She carried poise and quiet grace. Their chemistry was lightning and slow motion. By opening night, the line between acting and reality was gone. They married a year later in Millbrook, New York. Candlelight, rain tapping against windows, laughter from friends who understood that real joy doesn't need witnesses. He said afterward, "For the first time in my life, I can breathe." They built a life out of warmth and ordinary beauty. 2 sons, Michel and Daniel. A crooked backyard swing. Toys scattered across a kitchen, filled with burnt toast and laughter. "She made hard days gentle," he said. "She was my home." And then 2009. A ski slope. A fall that didn't look fatal. The call that changed everything. He arrived at the hospital. The smell of antiseptic and grief. The doctor's eyes said it before his mouth did. Her brain is gone. He walked in and saw her lying there, serene, almost smiling. He took her hand. "Sweetie," he whispered, "you're not coming back from this." He sat beside her for hours, talking softly, keeping the promise they'd made to let each other go if one couldn't return. He nodded. The machine stopped. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was absolute. "She's keeping 3 people alive," he said later. "She would have wanted that." He returned home to a house that no longer breathed. For months he moved through life as a shadow of himself. "I think I died that day too," he said. "But I kept breathing because she would have wanted that." Work became oxygen. He moved from set to set, film to film, Taken, Unknown, The Gray. Each story about survival was really about grief. In The Gray, where he fought wolves in the frozen dark, he was fighting the silence in his own chest. Whiskey became a nightly ritual until it stopped helping. He woke up one morning and didn't recognize the man in the mirror. That was the day he stopped. "I needed to show my boys how to stand." The tabloids tried to fill the silence with names: Pamela Anderson, Freya St. Johnston, rumors of companionship. He smiled politely and let the world talk. "But grief," he said, "doesn't like to share." Each February, he brings flowers to Natasha's resting place, brushes away the snow, talks to her softly as if she were in the next room. He tells her about their sons, about the weather, about how the winters are still too long. He swears sometimes the wind answers. And the pain didn't stop at the heart. In 2000, before tragedy struck his marriage, a motorcycle crash nearly ended everything. A deer on the road, a blur of motion. He hit the ground with enough force to shatter his pelvis in multiple places. Doctors doubted he'd survive the night. He did, but pain became his lifelong companion. Nights were worst, a dull singing in his bones that mocked sleep. He learned to live in inches, bed to chair, chair to door. "You can't fake gravity," he said. "You just learn to meet it halfway." Even decades later, his body remembers. Knees aching, back whispering complaints, muscles seizing in the dark from lactic acid and years of caffeine and exhaustion. Sometimes, he said, "I just walked around and cried." He quit coffee. The pain softened but never left. And he kept working. Because endurance wasn't a choice anymore. It was a habit. When asked why he didn't retire, he smiled that weary, knowing smile. "It's part of the deal, isn't it? Maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not invincibility, but acceptance. The quiet dignity of a man who has learned to live beside his pain without letting it define him." Now at 73, Liam Neeson walks a little slower. But he still walks. He spends his days between New York and the quiet countryside, where the air smells of pine and memory. The home he once shared with Natasha remains his refuge, the walls heavy with laughter that once lived there. He's worth over $100 million. But you wouldn't know it. His wealth is measured in stillness, not spectacle. The sedan instead of the limousine, the small dinner instead of the party. The silence that feels like peace, not emptiness. He gives quietly to UNICEF, Amnesty International, to children caught in wars he once pretended to fight on screen. He never announces it. Because goodness, like grief, doesn't need an audience. His sons are grown now. Mikhail, who took his mother's last name in tribute. Daniel, steady and loyal, the calm beside his father's storm. Liam calls them my greatest achievement. And that might be the truest thing he's ever said. As for love, when asked recently if he could ever love again, he paused, smiled softly. "No," he said, "I'm past all that." But maybe peace doesn't mean closing the door. Maybe it means leaving it open just enough for light to come through. He's been seen laughing again with friends, with castmates, maybe with someone who understands that broken things can still be beautiful. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. He has finally made peace with the silence. Because grief doesn't end. It simply changes shape. It becomes the wind that follows you, the warmth that refuses to leave your bones, the voice that still whispers your name when the world goes quiet. So when people call him a legend, maybe they're not talking about the films. Maybe they mean the man who stood back up over and over when the world kept asking how much more he could take. The man who learned that strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how gently you keep going. how you carry the love you lost without letting it crush you. At 73, Liam Neeson isn't chasing glory anymore. He's keeping promises. To his sons, to her, to himself. He still visits her each winter, brushing snow from her name, whispering words only the wind hears. And as the white flakes fall, soft, endless, falling like forgiveness, he smiles. Because somewhere between loss and endurance, he found what most never do: peace. If this story moved you, take a moment before you leave. Share your thoughts below. Tell us what resilience means to you. Because the quiet victories deserve to be remembered. And somewhere out there, another soul who's fighting their own storm might need to hear that it's possible to survive it and still stay kind. If you want more stories like this, true, human, unguarded, make sure you're subscribed. We'll keep telling them, one gentle, honest story at a time. Because strength doesn't roar, it endures. Just like Liam Neeson.